So I've been dealing with a lot of stuff lately that's been bubbling to the surface. Uh, kind of weird how it all came about too. Preface all this by saying, you know, the way I was brought up, we were never. I never learned how to deal with stuff on an emotional level. It was discouraged. Um, it was dismissed. Emotional response to to life was, discouraged and dismissed as unnecessary. And I never really got a clear a clear picture on how to deal with the emotional things that happen in your life. You know, I got taught how to deal with the very practical things in your life, but the the doing, working hard, this is what you do. This is how you do it. I learned a lot of stuff, how to do a lot of things, you know, whether it be, you know, fixing stuff or working around the house or, just whatever. I learned a lot of that stuff. But as far as emotional health and emotional well-being, I never really learned how to deal with that on any real level. My choices were shove it down deep inside, or the way I dealt with it sometimes later in life was to lash out. And it just, the stuff would build and build and build, because I'd been shoving it down, that eventually it had to go somewhere else. And somebody who had nothing to do with anything, and even if they did, would, take the brunt of it. And that wasn't fair to those people. But anyway, and this sounds weird, it may sound weird to some people. And even my wife had mentioned the fact and got me thinking about it, actually, was that a few days ago we had to get one of our dogs put down. He was getting old. He had vision problems. He had temperament. He was starting to get temperament issues. He had hearing problems. He had joint and hip problems. And then he'd gotten to the point where he had become, incontinent, and, he wasn't eating well, he wasn't sleeping well, and just, all the horrible things that go along with an incontinent dog. And it just, it wasn't a very good existence for him. It wasn't a very good existence for us to live in that. And, so, we had to make the tough decision to have him put down. And he had been with us, my wife and I, for a long time. I guess we got him in his actual age when we got him was indeterminate. They guessed, from 1.5 years to 2.5 years, something like that. And we had him for quite a while. So he was probably coming up on 12 years. He could have been coming up on 12 years. He could have been coming up on 13 years. Either way, he was getting up there. But when, he had moved with us to several different places. He had been with us through a lot. And, back when I used to travel a lot for work, that was the only thing my wife had, so that she wasn't alone, was our dog. And so she had a special connection to him, and I had there was a long time where we were inseparable. And, and I didn't realize, because the dynamic of our house in general changed when we have kids. And so much attention is focused on the kids that, sometimes unfortunately, things like, members of your family, like your dogs and stuff like that, sometimes get a little bit less. And we got another dog in the interim, so he wasn't completely alone and ignored. He had a partner that he could play with, and they played and they fought and they did all that stuff. And, so he was, he had someone giving him attention, and he kind of he was very protective of our kids, so he kind of had a purpose as well. But I was caught off guard at how hard it hit me when 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 we had him put down, because, like I said, I never learned how to deal with emotional stuff. So when I was going through the process, and it's not weird to be sad about a dog passing away. I think that's a very normal thing. But I was very caught off guard by how hard it hit me. And then when I thought about it more and more, there was a lot of other stuff that was coming to the surface, that all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was having to deal with something on an emotional level, and I really didn't know how before, but now I kind of do. And it's not, shoving stuff down inside is not something that I do anymore. So when this happened, I didn't shove it down. I dealt with it, and then once I dealt with one emotional thing, all of a sudden, all these other things that I had never dealt with started coming to the surface. The estrangement from my parents, the death of my mother. A lot of things. Like I said, my wife even mentioned the fact that I seemed more upset about the death of my dog than I did by the death of my mother. A lot of that had to do with the fact that we were estranged for over a decade, but the main part of it is I never had to deal with it. Because it was just another thing that I shoved deep down and never dealt with. And then a lot of this stuff came up, in the process of grieving my dog. All of a sudden, I'm grieving my mother. I'm grieving my estrangement from the rest of my family. I'm grieving all this lost time. I'm grieving all the way back to when I was in high school, when my grandfather died, and things like that. And all of a sudden, I'm having to deal with these things and think about these things on a real level. And it's not, I don't want to say it was, it's not like I've done it and it's over. It is not an easy thing to do. When all of a sudden you have to deal with all these things at once. And, my mind has been, sometimes has been kind of all over the place because I'm thinking about a lot of these things that I haven't thought about in a long, long time. But it's, there's things I've been doing, and I even tried to explain to my wife. I said, there's going to be things that I'm going to do or may do, I don't know, that are kind of focused on, may seem like they're centered on, the death of a dog, but it may not have anything to do with the dog per se. It's just, that's my way of dealing with what all these other things that I'm trying to deal with. Like yesterday, I carried some big rocks from our creek bed and, put them around where he's buried. And, just the process of going down into the creek and lifting these rocks and carrying them, 100 feet or so, a couple 100 feet, that process was, cathartic in a way. And I was thinking about all these things as I was doing that. I was mourning my dog, but I was also mourning my mother, even mourning my grandfather. I was mourning, lost relationships, and I was mourning the estrangements, and I was mourning just a lot of stuff, and I was dealing with a lot of stuff. And, and then there's other things I've thought about doing as well. And, and like I said, it may seem weird to some people that don't know that I'm so focused on this, some people say, you're just a dog. I mean, how much do you need to do? But a lot of it is almost therapeutic for me to go through this process and maybe use that as a focal point, but it's not really some of it is about that, but it's not really about that. It's about a lot of the other things. And I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else. And in the end, I don't even really care if it makes sense to anybody else, but it does. It means something to me. And if it helps me deal with these things that I've never had to deal with, then I can't see it as anything other than a positive. And maybe other people don't think that way, but it's definitely something that I feel I need to do and I want to do. And I don't know, it's something I wanted to talk about because it just seemed odd to me that something like a dog passing away has made me focus on things that I haven't thought about in a long, long time.